3 months ago, my wife started taking yoga classes twice a week. At first, I thought it was great. She seemed happier, more energized. But then the classes became daily. Then she started talking about her instructor constantly. How he understood mindfulness. How he helped her find inner peace. How he really listened to her problems. Tonight, she dropped the bomb that changed everything. I was watching the game when she walked into the living room with that serious expression I'd learned to dread. She stood there for a moment, fidgeting with her wedding ring, before finally speaking. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I'm leaving you for my yoga instructor. He understands me in ways you never have." I muted the TV and looked at her. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. We connect on a spiritual level. He sees the genuine me, not just someone who cooks dinner and pays bills. We've been talking for weeks about life, about dreams, about what it means to truly live authentically." I stood up slowly. "So you're having an emotional affair." "It's not an affair. It's a connection, a spiritual awakening. You wouldn't understand because you never try to understand me." The audacity was incredible. Here she was, telling me she was abandoning our marriage for some yoga instructor and somehow making it my fault. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that I finally found someone who appreciates me for who I truly am. Someone who doesn't just see me as a wife, but as a complete human being with needs and desires." I couldn't help but laugh. "You mean someone who sees you as an easy target? A married woman looking for attention?" Her face flushed. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You always dismiss my feelings, always make everything about your perspective. He would never say something so cruel, right? Because he's trying to get you into bed, not build a life with you." She crossed her arms defensively. "This conversation is pointless. I've made my decision. I'm moving out this weekend. I'll be staying with him until I find my own place." That's when I'd heard enough. I looked her straight in the eye and said exactly what was on my mind. "Great. Grab your stuff and get out of my sight." She blinked, clearly expecting me to fight for the marriage, to beg her to reconsider, to promise I'd change. "That's it. You're not going to try to work this out." "Work what out? You just told me you're leaving me for another man. What exactly is there to work out? I thought you'd want to fight for us, for what we built together." I shook my head. "You already threw that away the moment you started having intimate conversations with another man behind my back. You made your choice. Now live with it." She stared at me, mouth slightly open, like she couldn't process my reaction. "You're just going to let me go?" "I'm not letting you do anything. You're an adult making adult decisions. But don't expect me to stick around and watch you disrespect our marriage any further. This is exactly why our relationship failed. You never fight for anything important. Our relationship failed because you decided to pursue someone else instead of talking to your husband about whatever problems you were having. But hey, good luck finding spiritual enlightenment with your yoga instructor." She turned toward the stairs, then stopped. "I'll pack my things tomorrow when you're at work. Pack them tonight. I want you gone before I wake up tomorrow." "You're being unreasonable." "I'm being clear. You said you're leaving, so leave. Don't drag this out and make it messier than it already is." She stood there for another moment, probably waiting for me to break down or change my mind. When that didn't happen, she finally headed upstairs. I heard her moving around up there for the next 2 hours, opening drawers, zipping suitcases. Around midnight, she came back downstairs with 3 bags. "I'll come back for the rest later." "No, you won't. Whatever you don't take tonight gets donated. Make your choices now." She looked genuinely shocked. "You can't just throw away my belongings. Watch me. You're the one choosing to abandon this house and this marriage. Everything left behind becomes part of what you're abandoning." She made 2 more trips upstairs and came down with everything she could carry. At the door, she turned back one last time. "I hope you realize what you're losing. I hope you realize what you already lost." After she left, I sat back down and unmuted the game. The silence felt different than it had in months. Not empty, but clean. Tomorrow, I had some phone calls to make. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house and a clear head. No drama, no begging, no second-guessing. She made her choice, and I made mine. After coffee, I pulled out my laptop and started researching Zen Flow Yoga Studio, where she'd been taking classes. Their website had all the typical wellness language about transformation and finding your authentic self. More importantly, they had a detailed code of conduct and professional standards section. Under instructor guidelines, I found exactly what I was looking for. Clear policies about maintaining professional boundaries with students, especially regarding personal relationships and emotional intimacy. The document specifically stated that instructors should maintain appropriate professional distance and avoid personal relationships that could compromise the therapeutic environment. I scrolled through the staff section and found him. Derek something, 28 years old, been with the studio for 2 years. His bio talked about helping people discover their true potential through mindful movement and spiritual connection. The guy looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who preys on vulnerable married women. I grabbed my phone and called the studio. A cheerful voice answered. Zen Flow Yoga. This is Amanda. How can I help you? Hi, Amanda. I need to speak with the owner or manager about a serious professional conduct issue involving one of your instructors. Her tone shifted immediately. Oh, can I ask what this is regarding? I'd prefer to discuss it directly with whoever's in charge. It involves inappropriate conduct with a married student. Hold on one moment, please. After a few minutes, a man's voice came on the line. This is Brian Walsh. I own the studio. Amanda said you have concerns about one of our instructors? Yes, and I appreciate you taking this seriously. My wife has been a student at your studio for several months, and last night she informed me she's leaving our marriage to pursue a relationship with her instructor, Derek. She mentioned they've been having personal conversations about her marriage and life outside of class. There was silence on the other end for a moment. I see. That's definitely not something we tolerate here. Can you give me more details about what's been happening? Over the past few weeks, she's been staying after classes for extended conversations with him. She mentioned he's been giving her advice about her personal life and marriage. Last night, she told me she feels he understands her better than her husband does, and she's moving in with him. This is extremely concerning. We have very strict policies about instructors maintaining professional boundaries specifically to prevent these situations. Can you hold while I pull Derek's file and check our scheduling records? Of course. When Brian came back on the line, his tone was serious. I've reviewed our policies, and this situation clearly violates multiple guidelines we have in place. Professional conduct is non-negotiable here. We can't have instructors developing personal relationships with married students. It destroys trust and creates liability issues. I appreciate that. I'm not looking for drama or revenge. I just think you should know what's happening under your roof. You did the right thing calling. This kind of behavior reflects poorly on our entire organization and puts other students at risk. I'll be addressing this immediately. When is Derek's next class? He has an evening session at 7 tonight. But honestly, I'm not sure he'll be teaching it. After hanging up, I felt satisfied. Not vindictive, just satisfied that actions have consequences. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone's life, but professional standards exist for a reason. I spent the rest of the day handling practical matters. Changed the locks, contacted my bank to remove her access to our joint accounts, and called my lawyer to discuss divorce proceedings. Everything methodical, everything rational. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone started buzzing with texts from her. First confused, then angry, then desperate. Apparently, Derek had been called into an emergency meeting with management. She wanted to know if I had anything to do with it. I didn't respond. She made her choice to leave, so our communication was over. By 5 o'clock, the texts were coming every few minutes. Derek had been fired effective immediately. The studio was launching an internal investigation. She was demanding I call her back to explain what I'd done. I turned my phone to silent and went to the gym. When I got back 2 hours later, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen voicemails I deleted without listening to. The evening news was just starting when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Then another. I looked out the window and saw her getting out of an Uber and Derek climbing out of a beat-up Honda Civic. This was going to be interesting. I watched them through the window as they stood in my driveway, clearly arguing. She kept pointing at the house while he shook his head and gestured toward his car. After a few minutes, they both started walking toward my front door. I didn't answer the first round of knocking, or the doorbell, or the second round of knocking that was significantly more aggressive. I know you're in there, she yelled through the door. We need to talk. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged, creating just enough space to see them both standing on my porch. She looked furious. Derek looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. What do you want? I asked calmly. You know exactly what I want. You called his job and got him fired. Do you have any idea what you've done? I looked past her at Derek. Actually, I'd like to hear from the yoga expert. What exactly did I do? Derek shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Maybe we can work something out here. Work something out? You mean like you worked something out with my wife while she was married to me? It wasn't like that. We just talked. She was going through a difficult time, and I was being supportive. Right? Supportive enough that she decided to leave her marriage for you. That's some pretty intensive emotional support. She cut in. This is ridiculous. You ruined his career over jealousy. I didn't ruin anything. Professional standards ruined his career. All I did was inform his employer about his unprofessional conduct with a married client. Unprofessional conduct? We talked about life and spirituality. That's what yoga is about. I almost laughed. Yoga is about flexibility and breathing. What you two were doing was called having an emotional affair, which led to you abandoning your marriage. His employer apparently agrees that crossed some lines. Derek finally spoke up again. The studio overreacted. We never did anything physical. Congratulations. You want a medal for not sleeping with someone else's wife? You just convinced her to leave her marriage instead. Much more honorable. You don't understand the connection we have, she said. This isn't some casual thing. We have a genuine spiritual bond. Then you shouldn't have any problem building a life together without his yoga instructor income. I'm sure spiritual connections pay the bills just fine. Derek's face darkened. You had no right to interfere with my job. I had every right to inform a business owner that his employee was violating company policy. What you did with that information was your choice, just like pursuing my wife was your choice. This is insane, she said. You're destroying people's lives because you're angry. I'm not destroying anything. You destroyed our marriage when you decided another man understood you better than your husband. Derek destroyed his own career when he decided professional boundaries didn't apply to him. I just made sure the right people had the right information. They exchanged a look, and I could see the reality setting in. Derek had lost his job. She had left her marriage, and now they were both facing the actual consequences of their choices without the romantic fantasy to cushion the blow. So what now? Derek asked. You got what you wanted. I'm unemployed, and she's homeless. She's not homeless. She's staying with you, remember? The spiritual connection should make that living situation work out perfectly. My lease doesn't allow long-term guests, he said quietly. The silence that followed was beautiful. I could practically see the wheels turning in both their heads as they realized their grand romantic gesture had some very practical problems they hadn't considered. Figure it out, I said. You're both adults who made adult decisions. Deal with the adult consequences. I started to close the door, but she put her hand against it. Wait, can we at least discuss this rationally? Maybe there's a way to fix some of this damage. There's nothing to discuss. You made your choice. I made mine. Derek made his choice. His employer made theirs. Everyone's choices have been made. But his career is his problem now. Just like your housing situation is your problem now. Just like your relationship is your problem now. Derek pulled on her arm. Come on, let's go. This isn't getting us anywhere. No, she said, shaking him off. This is my life too. My marriage, my house, my things. Your marriage ended when you chose another man. Your house was never just yours. Your things are whatever you took with you last night. Everything else was part of what you abandoned. You can't just erase 8 years together. I'm not erasing anything. You erased it when you decided our marriage wasn't worth working on, but your connection with Derek was worth destroying it for. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. They stood on the porch for another 10 minutes, talking in increasingly loud voices. Eventually, I heard car doors slam and engines start. From the window, I watched Derek's Honda struggle to start while she sat in the passenger seat, probably getting her first taste of what her new life was actually going to look like. The spiritual connection was about to get very practical very quickly. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No passive-aggressive comments about breakfast, no complaints about my choice of morning TV, no dramatic sighs about how I never listened to her needs. Just peaceful quiet and strong coffee. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m., but I kept it on silent. When I finally checked the messages, there were texts from numbers I didn't recognize, a few missed calls from her sister, and one particularly entertaining voicemail from Derek's mother asking me to find it in my heart to forgive her son's mistake. I deleted everything without responding. Around noon, my neighbor knocked on the door. Frank lived next door and had always been friendly, though we'd never been particularly close. Hey, everything all right over here? I saw some commotion last night. Just my wife's poor life choices catching up with her. Nothing to worry about. Frank nodded knowingly. Heard she was spending a lot of time at that yoga place downtown. My wife goes there sometimes, said there was drama yesterday. One of the instructors got fired. Really? What kind of drama? Apparently the guy was getting too friendly with married students. Studio owner found out and canned him on the spot. My wife said some of the other students weren't surprised. Guess he had a reputation for being overly attentive to certain female clients. Interesting. So Derek had a pattern, and I wasn't the first husband to notice inappropriate behavior. The studio owner probably appreciated having a legitimate reason to address a problem they'd been aware of but couldn't prove. Well, professional boundaries exist for a reason, I said. Absolutely. Anyway, just wanted to make sure you didn't need anything. Sometimes these situations get messy. After Frank left, I decided to run some errands. At Target, I grabbed new bedding, some groceries, and a few things to refresh the house. While checking out, the cashier commented on how much happier I looked compared to the last time she'd seen me. Going through some positive changes, I told her. Around 3 p.m., I was reorganizing the closet when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Is this Derek's fault or yours? The voice was angry, female, and unfamiliar. Excuse me. My daughter called me crying this morning because her boyfriend lost his job and now she has nowhere to live. I want to know if you're the husband who called his work. Your daughter made a choice to leave her marriage. Derek made a choice to pursue a married woman. I made a choice to inform his employer about unprofessional conduct. Everyone made choices. He's a good man who made a mistake. She's a good girl who was just confused about her marriage. Good people don't convince married women to abandon their families. Confused people work on their marriages, they don't run away from them. You could have handled this differently. You could have been more understanding. I could have been a lot of things. But I chose to protect myself and let professionals handle professional misconduct. Your son chose to ignore workplace policies. Your daughter chose to prioritize her feelings over her commitments. How I handled it is the least important part of this situation. She hung up on me. 5 minutes later, Derek's number appeared on my screen. I let it go to voicemail. Look, I know you're angry, but this has gone too far. She's falling apart. Can't you just call the studio and tell them you misunderstood what happened? Maybe say it wasn't as serious as you thought. I deleted the message. By evening, the calls and texts had escalated to desperate. She was begging me to help Derek get his job back, promising to work on our marriage if I would just make one phone call to fix this mess, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake and needed time to think clearly. The change in tone was remarkable. Yesterday, she was leaving me for her spiritual soulmate. Today, she was offering to work on our marriage if I'd help her unemployed boyfriend find work. Around 9 p.m., my lawyer called. Got your paperwork started. Straightforward case since she abandoned the marital home voluntarily. Should be pretty clean unless she decides to fight it. She won't fight it. She's too busy dealing with the consequences of her other decisions. Good. I've seen these cases drag out when people get vindictive. Sounds like you're keeping this practical. Just want it done efficiently. After hanging up, I poured myself a drink and settled in to watch a movie without anyone commenting on my choice or asking to change the channel. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from her. Derek says we need to talk tomorrow. This isn't over. I turned the phone off and enjoyed the rest of my evening in peace. Tomorrow was going to be interesting, but tonight was perfect. At 2:17 a.m., aggressive pounding on my front door woke me up. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that threatens to wake the entire neighborhood. I checked the security camera on my phone. Both of them stood on my porch, her gesturing wildly while Derek looked around nervously. She appeared to be yelling, though I couldn't hear what she was saying through the door. I grabbed a robe and headed downstairs, turning on the porch light as I approached the door. The pounding stopped immediately. Open this door right now, she screamed. We're not leaving until you fix what you did. I opened the door but kept the chain engaged. It's 2 a.m. You're disturbing my neighbors and trespassing on my property. I don't care about your neighbors. You ruined our lives, and now you're going to make it right. Derek stepped closer to the door. This is getting out of hand, man. Just call the studio tomorrow and tell them you overreacted. Tell them you were angry and exaggerated what happened. I'm not calling anyone. You violated professional standards, got fired, and now you're both dealing with the consequences. That's how the genuine world works. The genuine world? She laughed bitterly. You mean the world where bitter husbands destroy people's careers out of jealousy? I mean the world where actions have consequences. You chose to leave your marriage for an unemployed yoga instructor. He chose to risk his career for a married woman. I chose to inform his employer about policy violations. Everyone got exactly what they chose. Derek's face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. What we have is authentic. Something you obviously never understood. What you have is a spiritual connection and no income. How's that working out for your housing situation? We'll figure it out, she said defiantly. I'm sure you will. But you'll figure it out somewhere else, because this conversation is over. I started to close the door, but Derek slammed his palm against it. No, it's not over. You think you can just destroy people's lives and walk away. I released the chain and opened the door fully, stepping onto the porch. I didn't destroy anything. But if you put your hands on my door again, we're going to have a much bigger problem. What are you going to do? Derek stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height. Call the cops. File another complaint. Derek, don't, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. No, I'm tired of this guy acting like he's some kind of victim. He's the one who. I'm the one who what? Had a wife who decided another man understood her better? Had a marriage that wasn't worth fighting for? Had professional standards that needed to be enforced? Derek's face flushed. You want to know what I think? I think she's better off without someone like you. Someone who would rather destroy people than face the truth about why his wife wanted to leave. You want to know what I think? I stepped closer to him. I think if she betrayed her husband this easily for you, she'll betray you just as easily for the next guy who makes her feel special. That's not true, she protested. Isn't it? How long before you're telling the next instructor or trainer or counselor that Derek doesn't understand you the way they do? Derek's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? She threw away 8 years of marriage for a guy she'd known for a few months. What makes you think you're special? She'll toss you aside the moment someone else offers her more excitement. Shut up, Derek said through gritted teeth. She'll cheat on you too, kid. That's what she does when things get difficult. She runs. That's when Derek lost control and swung at me. I saw it coming from a mile away. He telegraphed the punch like an amateur, all emotion and no technique. I ducked under his wild haymaker, stepped behind him, and wrapped my arm around his neck in a rear naked choke before he could recover his balance. He struggled for about 10 seconds before his legs gave out, and I guided him to the ground, maintaining the choke until he went limp. Not unconscious, just neutralized. The whole time, she was screaming. At me, at him, at the situation. High-pitched, panicked screaming that probably woke up half the block. I released Derek and stood up. He rolled onto his side, coughing and gasping for air. Derek, are you okay? She dropped to her knees beside him. I looked down at both of them. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car and drive away. If either of you shows up at my house again, I'm calling the police and filing harassment charges. If you contact me again, I'm getting a restraining order. If you even drive down this street again, you'll regret it. Derek struggled to sit up, still wheezing. You can't just. I can and I did. You took a swing at me on my own property. That's assault. I defended myself. Any questions about how that conversation goes with the police? She helped Derek to his feet, both of them looking shaken and defeated. This isn't over, she said weakly. Yes, it is. Your drama, your poor choices, your consequences, all of it stops being my problem right now. Figure out your own lives and leave me out of it. They stumbled toward Derek's car, her supporting his weight as he continued to recover. I waited on the porch until I heard the engine start and watched the taillights disappear down the street. Back inside, I double-checked all the locks and reset the security system. Tomorrow, I'd be calling about restraining orders and upgrading the cameras. But tonight, the house was finally quiet again. 3 weeks later, my lawyer called with good news. The divorce papers had been signed and filed. No contest, no drama, no last-minute attempts to reconcile. She'd signed everything without changes and submitted them through her own attorney. Fastest resolution I've seen in months, he said. Most of these cases drag on for 6 months or more. This was clean. She didn't have much choice. Hard to fight for half of something when you voluntarily abandoned it for someone else. Speaking of which, I heard through the legal community that Derek filed for unemployment benefits. Apparently, he's having trouble finding work in the wellness industry. Word travels fast in that business. I wasn't surprised. Professional misconduct follows people, especially in small industries where reputation matters. Derek had learned that spiritual connections don't pay rent, and employers don't like hiring instructors with boundary issues. The house felt different now, not empty, but refreshed. I'd repainted the living room, rearranged the furniture, and gotten rid of anything that reminded me of her complaints or demands. The place actually felt like home again instead of a battlefield. My neighbor Frank stopped by that afternoon with a six-pack and some news. Thought you'd want to know. I saw your ex-wife at the grocery store yesterday. She was with some guy, but it wasn't the yoga instructor. Already moved on to someone new? Looked like it. My wife recognized him as a manager from the gym downtown. Guess Derek didn't work out as a long-term plan. I popped open a beer and shook my head. Called that one. She lasted what? 3 weeks with her spiritual soulmate. About that, my wife said Derek's been asking around about part-time work. Apparently living on unemployment and spiritual enlightenment isn't covering the bills. We sat on my back deck, enjoying the quiet evening. Frank asked about my plans going forward, whether I'd thought about dating again, how I was handling everything. Honestly, I feel better than I have in years. Turns out removing toxic people from your life is incredibly liberating. No regrets about how you handled it. None. Could I have fought for the marriage? Sure. Could I have tried counseling or compromise? Absolutely. But why would I want to keep someone who'd rather pursue other men than work on our relationship? She did me a favor by showing her true character early. Frank nodded. Takes strength to walk away when someone shows you who they really are. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. This is Derek. I want to apologize for what happened. Things got out of hand, and I shouldn't have tried to hit you. No excuses. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Apologies don't undo choices, and I had no interest in absolving anyone of their consequences. 2 days later, my lawyer called again. Divorce is finalized. Official as of this morning. Also, there's something else you should know. Derek and your ex-wife both filed police reports about the incident at your house. And nothing. They admitted he swung first on your property after you told them to leave. The responding officer classified it as self-defense and recommended they avoid further contact with you. No charges, no investigation. They actually made themselves look worse by filing the reports. Good to know. Oh, and one more thing. I heard from a colleague that Derek's been having trouble with his lease. Apparently, his landlord doesn't appreciate late-night domestic disturbances in the building. He's looking at eviction proceedings. The cosmic justice was almost poetic. Derek lost his job for crossing professional boundaries, lost his apartment for bringing drama home, and lost his spiritual connection when she found someone with better financial prospects. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my own house, debt-free, drama-free, and finally at peace. 6 months later, I ran into her at a restaurant downtown. She was with yet another guy, someone I didn't recognize. When she saw me, she looked embarrassed and tried to avoid eye contact. I nodded politely and continued to my table. No anger, no sadness, no curiosity about her new situation. She'd become exactly what she'd always been, someone else's problem. The waitress seated me by the window, and I ordered my usual. As I waited for my food, I reflected on how different my life had become since that night she announced she was leaving for her yoga instructor. No more walking on eggshells around someone's mood swings. No more justifying my choices to someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. No more pretending that love meant accepting disrespect or betrayal. I'd learned something valuable about setting boundaries and enforcing consequences. When people show you who they are, believe them. When they choose to leave, let them go. When they try to make their poor choices your problem, refuse to participate. The divorce was final, the drama was over, and my life was exactly where I wanted it to be. Clean, peaceful, and completely under my control. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to fight for someone who's already decided you're not worth fighting for. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal is simply walking away and building something better. Derek learned that actions have consequences. She learned that grass isn't always greener. And I learned that self-respect is worth more than any relationship built on compromise and accommodation. The story was over, and I'd written the ending myself.
안 그렇습니까? 우리나라 먹으려고 하는 중국인데 솔직히 북한은 우리나라한테 위협이 안 돼. 예. 우리나라한테 위협이 안 돼요, 북한은. 사실 위협이 되는 건 이제 중국이나 미국 같은 좀 대륙권들, 예, 큰 나라들이 더 이제 우리한테 위협이 되는 거지. 야, 아침 뭐 먹지? 아, 김치찌개 같은 거 먹을까? 그러니까 중국이 북한 땅 먹는 순간, 우리한테 진짜 크나큰 그거가 돼. 진짜 좆대요. 뉴스를 보는 게 아니라 여러분들 생각을 해봐. 내가 뉴스를 많이 봐서 이런 얘기를 하는 게 아니라 딱 봐도 척하면 척이잖아. 북한은 우리한테 위협이 안 돼요. 북한도 우리가 없으면 안 돼. 우리가 막 소 주고 쌀 주고 그러니까 북한 사람들도 먹고 사는 건데, 북한은 우리랑 싸우면 손해라니까. 그리고 이제 중국은 우리를 먹으려고 하잖아. 자꾸 뭐 우리나라 부동산을 사거나 뭐 우리나라에서 자꾸 뭐 하려고 하잖아. 우리나라 기술력 빼오려고 하고. 중국이 적이지 북한이 적이 아니라니까. 밥 뭐 먹을까요? 그러니까 북한 우리랑 전쟁 못 한다니까. 무서워서라 전쟁 못 해. 우리나라가 북한한테 지원해 주는 게 얼만데. 그것마저도 없잖아. 그럼 진짜 북한 사람들, 진짜 북한 인민들 다 굶어 죽어. 진짜 북한 시민들 다 굶어 죽어요. 맞아, 북한도 중국 싫어해. 비즈니스 관계라니까. 뭐 둘이 친한 줄 알죠. 안 친해. 이게 원래 그래. 서로 친한 척 하는 거지. 뒤에서는 이제 총 들고 있다니까. 총 겨누고 있다니까, 대가리에.